Are you ready? Let's go!
Don't you sometimes just want to talk about everything? You know, there's days when you can just talk about anything. Need to sit back and chat about nothing at all? Nothing But Julie, coming at you with fun and creative topics and interviews.
Did you hear Julie's podcast? She's got the greatest topics.
Come join the chat about everything, anything, and nothing. So unwind and tune in to Nothing But Julie. Great topics and cool interviews with some pretty awesome people. And now, without further delay, here's Nothing But Julie.
Hello and welcome to Nothing But Julie. I am your host, Julie Schrager. Thanks so much for joining me today. So, happy Thanksgiving week. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy Black Friday to all of you. I do hope that you have a really great Thanksgiving. I know this year it might be a little different for many people. And I hope that you're all staying safe and you are socially distancing yourselves and wearing masks and all of that. Really just be safe and stay healthy during this time. We all just have to be a little bit more conscious and cautious of what's been going on in this crazy world of ours. So thanks again for joining me. And, I try and think of, what are some topics that I can discuss? And that is why I name my podcast I chat about everything, anything, and nothing, because sometimes I like to just ramble and kind of wing it and think, what's going to come to my mind. And then there are times when I really do have things that I want to discuss that I think are fun and important. Right now, I am going to discuss 20th century inventions. And the reason for this is I was actually thinking the other day about my son playing lacrosse. And I have no idea how I started thinking about how did they even invent lacrosse and how did they come up with the lacrosse stick? And it just kind of made me start thinking about inventions and how certain things, were invented and by whom and what the years were. So I thought it might be fun to discuss 20th century inventions and break it up into two parts. And my next podcast will be 21st century inventions, although we are only in 20 years. But I was doing some research, folks, and there's quite a few inventions that have, been thought of in the 21st century. So there are going to be a lot of things here that you're going to say, what? That was invented X amount of years ago? And maybe, some of the ideas that people had with the invention. So I am going to start off in the early 1900s, 1901 to be exact, where the vacuum cleaner was invented. Does anybody know what the first vacuum cleaner was or what it even looked like? Yes, of course, I had to do some research, but apparently, and a lot of you might say Hoover, and if you did, then you are correct, because that's the first thing I thought of too. But I wasn't sure if I was correct. But the man who invented Hoover was James Spangler. He actually had this idea for an electric broomstick-like cleaner. And he apparently had asthma. So he thought, I could put cloth filters and I can, add like a bag to collect dust with like a long handle. And he decided to sell his invention to William Hoover. And that was in the early 1900s. Again, he thought of the idea in 1901, but it was sold to Hoover in 1908. And it was by far the first domestic invention for cleanliness or cleaning the floor. And it kind of went from, everybody would use a broom, like a regular broom, but then you had to collect it all. What's a really great idea to possibly come up with. And he thought of this idea, and it's amazing. Over 100 years ago, he thought of this practicality for people. And apparently Hoover had a factory in Britain, and he had these machines that were able to produce high-end, at that time, high-end products. But, at the time, people didn't know too much about vacuum cleaning or what a vacuum cleaner was. So after he sold this to Hoover, Hoover started coming out with so many different prototypes and models. And it just became like a household essential, I would say. It was kind of more like a leisure type thing for most homeowners, and now today, many of the vacuum cleaners come with our home, or we have the iRobot or other types of vacuum cleaners like the iRobot, and ones that have HEPA filters. I mean, it has really just changed since the early days, but that's all you need is an idea and an invention. And guess what? Even though it's been over 100 years, it's still the same idea. I'm just going to go through the list and just talk about the ones that I think are important. I'm not going to go over each one. Okay, so in 1902, the air conditioning system was invented. Pretty cool. 1902. Because sometimes I'll say to my husband, stupidly enough, when was electricity created? I won't know. If I want to think about, let's say, the vacuum cleaner, well, I mean, I have to know when electricity was created or invented before, the vacuum cleaner. Duh. Okay, so apparently in 1903, and I'm not going to go through every single year, but it's just kind of cool. In 1903, the electrocardiogram was first invented, and shortly thereafter, tea bags were invented. I never even thought about that. And then I'm going to say from 1900 to 1910, these are the things that were pretty prominent that were invented. Let's see, plastic, a silencer for guns. Wow. Radio. Radio was actually, let's see, that was in 1906. And then you had the washing machine, water coolers, paper cups. And this is pretty cool too, the assembly line production. That actually started, or was invented rather, in 1908. And the Model T, which was the first affordable car. Pretty cool to know that. Okay, so let's go into the next 10 years of inventions, 1911 to 1920. Stenotype machines. You know what stenotype machines are? I actually know stenography because I went to Catherine Gibbs, where it was part of the curriculum. Actually, not mine was like speed writing. It wasn't stenotype. It kind of took off from the idea of stenotype. But the stenotype is like a machine that it kind of looks like a typewriter, and it records speech in like syllables. And I mean, that is very close to like what a transcriber looks like, that many, what are they called? Men or women that do that in court. I mean, maybe they're just considered a transcriber. But you actually need to be trained in transcription. So what you do is you're basically recording what people are saying. And then you are going to take this machine that has like multiple keys that you press like simultaneously, and it spells out whole syllables and words and phrases with like a single motion by listening to the recordings. So when I went to Catherine Gibbs, I learned about speed writing, which is basically words put into symbols and certain characters. So, well, this is really important. Ecstasy. 1913, ecstasy was invented. Wow. Okay. Crossword puzzles. Hair dryers in 1920. And submachine guns. Now, I wonder what the submachine guns were invented for, unless somebody just invented it. I didn't really look that up, but I can right now. I'm going to see. Okay, so it says that, well, I know exactly what it is, but I really would like to know what submachine guns were for. Okay, let me see. I'm sure it was the military, but I would like to know exactly. It says here, according to Wikipedia, that it was developed during World War One as close quarter offensive weapons. I'm quoting this from Wikipedia, mainly for trench raiding. And during World War II, millions of submachine guns were made for use by regular troops and commandos. And it says after the war, submachine gun designs appeared frequently. Well, so there you go. I had a feeling they were developed for the war. Okay, next 10 years, 1921 to 1930, insulin was invented. And then after that, I can't wait till I get to like the ones that I really, really want to talk about. Hearing aids, frozen food. 1924, frozen food was invented. And then 1925, television. So that is what I really want to talk about. I did some research on the television. And we all know what it is. However, I wanted to, get a little bit more into it than, just the apparent reason. So let me talk about television, how it was invented, when it was invented, and all that other good stuff. So the most, excuse me, when I think about television, I think about the world that we live in today and how things have changed. We still have to watch TV or streaming or videos or whatever it might be. We still have to watch it on some kind of a screen, whether it's a TV screen, an iPad screen, and an iPhone screen, all different screens, computer screen. But the same premise of TV is still there. And it's the fact of seeing, I guess, multiple images. So, people talk about that the actual TV, when it was first invented, actually destroyed brain cells. And that it made people, damaged mentally and psychologically. But, I don't think so. The boob tube. I don't think that anybody really, by looking at it, is going to reduce brain cells, unless what they mean is you're not using your brain, and that's why it could be destroying brain cells. And watching certain programming can be emotionally and psychologically damaging. But still, where would we be today? Lots of people love to stream. Lots of people love to watch certain TV shows and movies. And because of COVID, Lord knows, everybody is taking advantage of all of that. And what better way to watch it through a TV, whether it's a flat screen TV or a computer, doesn't matter. It's like a built-in babysitter. And for those moms and dads out there, come on, you know that even though you might have said that you were not going to use the TV as a babysitter, we all did, me included, guilty. So one of the great things about it, besides babysitting your child when you needed a bit of a break or to cook or whatever it was, it's a great source for news, entertaining or entertainment. I think it's great for teaching how to do certain things like YouTube. But I do definitely think that it is useful. I think that if you use TV, you don't, okay, I'm losing my words. Moderation is key. All right. I think watching TV, I think using it for educational reasons is great. But you also need to be, active and not, sit on your behind all day. But do you remember some of those like shows where you would see people just like once a night or once a week waiting for that like one TV show and the family all gathered together and watched the same show? Oh, I tell you, never really did that with my parents that much, but apparently it was a Scottish inventor who employed the Nipkow disc in his prototype video systems. Again, getting this from Wikipedia, but in 1925, he gave a demonstration of these images, these images in motion at a certain department store in London. But apparently, some of the human colors did not have very good contrast. And so that is when he did a televised production of a dummy, a ventriloquist's dummy, and he apparently painted the dummy in like more contrasted colors. And after apparently filming or televising that, I should also say, talking and moving and all that other stuff. But he, about a year later, he was able to see all the errors and the mistakes. And he then did another, like in-face kind of motion. And apparently at this time, he was able to use certain discs that had like lenses. And apparently it like swept images across a cell, like a photo cell. And that the light that was reflecting from the subject converted it into like an electrical signal. It's all kind of scientific but cool at the same time to read about how it was invented. And then apparently in 1928, the television broadcast its very first signal between London and New York. That's pretty cool. And then a man by the name of Jenkins, he was an American inventor. He also pioneered the television in the States, in the United States. And it was all about transmitting images for witnesses to see. And it goes on and on and on, but apparently, I think it was in Japan, I'm not too sure, someone had demonstrated a television that had like a certain line resolution. Anyway, all this is kind of boring to me and I want to stop talking about it. But it was a prototype that was even better than all of the other ones. And so that is television. I'm really not, I don't want to go through all of Wikipedia and how they went from monochrome to color and digital and all of that. But here we are in the advent of smart TVs, digital television, which I have to tell you, I love. I love it. I love watching my Netflix and Hulu and Prime Video and On Demand. And they didn't have this when I was a kid in the 80s. They had first started cable and HBO when I was a kid. So all of these advances are just going to keep coming. It's hard to think of what else they can come up with, but the technology we have today is going to be considered to be very old in another year or two. Okay, so let us move on into the middle part of the century. No, we're not in the middle part of the century. I want to also mention that penicillin and the jet engine were also invented in 1930. So let's go from 30 to 40. Okay. And one of the most important inventions was the razor, the electric razor. That's pretty cool too. And continuing on, it was also the wheelchair and the cat eye makeup. I have to, try doing that again. It looks good on me, but I just don't know how to do it, so I don't do it. And I know it looks good on me because I've had it done maybe twice, and I remember it looked good. So, electric guitar in 1935, and the electric blanket, 1936. And ending out the decade, helicopters were invented. All right, so from the 1940s to the 1950s, we started to get dramatically better when it came to inventions. And not so, let me rephrase that, not so much better, but more advanced, which might seem better, but when I bring up the first one, you're going to know what I mean by, it's not better in all situations, which is nuclear power. And that's kind of like what the steam power was like in the 19th centuries. A huge game changer. It was like an alternate at the time, and still is, but at the time it was an alternate power source. And the difference between that and steam power was it was much more efficient, and it could virtually change things overnight. But don't forget, it is a two-edged sword in that that source, that nuclear power source, is also destructive, and when they're used as weapons. And I think about, I forget the name of the TV or the movie that I saw when I was younger, and it was I think it was like the day after, but it was when a nuclear bomb had gone off, and you can see all the smoke, and it scared the shit out of me, because it was like seeing the world coming to an end right in front of you. So that's how I always viewed nuclear power, but it's also very radioactive, and there are some areas, especially, do you guys remember Chernobyl? It's uninhabitable now, and I think 3 or maybe 4. I don't know if they are called cages, but these buildings have been built over the original Chernobyl, and we might be up to the 3rd or 4th one. And as each one is created, it becomes more efficient and can last longer. And I believe that one was just built, or one is being built, which does not have to be, another one does not have to be built after this, I think, for 100 years. So that's good, but the bad thing is what happened at Chernobyl and the explosion. And, that was a travesty. And that's why I say that nuclear power can be good and it can be the bad. I have a fear of nuclear power, the destruction of it all. But I also think that the fear of nuclear power has maybe prevented us going into another war because of the destruction it can have. If you're going to operate nuclear power safely, then that's a big difference. When you've got a lot of nuclear power plants that are incredible, and they're a wonderful energy source to power cities. But, are we going to take advantage of that and ultimately use that as a weapon? I really hope not, because that could really be devastating. So after the nuclear reactor was built, we then come into a kidney dialysis machine was invented. That was in 1944. And then in 1945, the nuclear bomb. Isn't that nice? Hey, atomic power. Very scary stuff. Anything that, is like nuclear, an atom bomb, it scares the shit out of me. And apparently that was back in 1945, I think I said. It oh my God. I remember reading, I think it was one of my history classes in high school, when it's the first atom bomb target was in Hiroshima. And I mean, the amount of power that it had was incredible. And Hiroshima was flattened. And I remember reading about this thinking, my God, an entire city gone? I mean, my question is, how do they have such explosive power? One bomb. I'm so curious about that. I know that they made advances before 1945, and I know that they used uranium and neutrons. I don't know too much about the atom bomb, and I don't know too much about the physics that go behind it, but I know that it's also very scary, and it's not something that I really like to talk about because it's scary enough as it is. But let us move on from the atom bomb. Okay. I don't know. It makes me a little nervous. There's so much technology and so many new inventions and enhancements on these inventions that it's become very scary to me. The microwave oven was in 1946, but it wasn't until like the mid 1990s or the early 1990s where like we actually used microwave ovens, right? But yet they were invented in the 40s. I can't believe this one, that a bikini was also invented, and so was Tupperware. Tupperware and Tupperware parties. I think, we still have Tupperware parties today. And I've never gone to one, but I do like Tupperware. I do like storage units, I should say. Let's see. Artificial intelligence and mobile phones in 1947. Took a while after that for them to really become wireless phones for us. Excuse me, with cell towers and all that. Frisbees and contact lenses and credit cards. Moving on to the middle of the 20th century. The contraceptive pill. Dun, 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 dun. Oh, the controversy over that. Let's see. The transistor radio. And polio vaccine. That's always pretty awesome when you get a vaccine, like we should be getting fairly soon for COVID. Really hope it does work. The videotape recorder, video games, seatbelts for cars, and the pacemaker. I'm getting all of this from historylearningsite.co.uk. It's really a great site for all different kinds of inventions for the 20th century. 1960s to the 70s. Man in Space, 1961. And then, of course, one of the most important inventions, I think, the lava lamp, came in 1963. I recently saw on TikTok how to actually make a lava lamp. And I don't remember how, but it included some kind of oil, maybe like a mineral oil, food dye, and all that. Okay, so moving on. The pocket television was invented in 1966. Can you imagine being one of the first ones to have a pocket television? Every time something new comes out, a new invention or something that's been hyped, it's so cool to kind of be able to afford to get it and to have it. But like I said, things today are going to be obsolete in a year or two from now. So anyway, what's really cool too is in the 1960s, late 1968, the artificial heart was invented. And in 1970, LED and LCD lights. Pretty cool. So moving on into the 70s and 80s, many of you might remember these actual inventions coming out. Whereas prior to these years, I don't remember them being invented because I wasn't born. I know they were invented, but I was born in 69, so I do know about a lot of these inventions. Floppy disk, right away, bam. I didn't know that it was invented in the 1970s. I thought it was introduced like in the 1980s or the early 1900s, but it was invented. It didn't mean that like we used them back then. And of course, right now, they're totally obsolete. And of course, for many, many people, this amazing invention of Prozac was invented. Disposable lighter. Pretty cool. Barcodes. Barcodes? 1973? The personal computer came out in 1975. And then in vitro fertilization and the MRI came out. And then one of the most important inventions that came out in 1980 was an abortion pill and the hepatitis B vaccine. And so moving on into the latter part of the 20th century, the 1980s, space shuttle, 1981. Pretty cool that the space shuttle was invented back then. I thought that was something that was earlier, but Macintosh computer, 1984. And then disposable contact lenses, which I don't use contact lenses, but I know a lot of people that do. And let me tell you, some people I know, well, many people I know actually love disposable contact lenses. I think that my mom might be one of the only ones that does not have disposable contact lenses. And the World Wide Web. So you see, like, slowly more types of computer programs, accessing computers start to come out. Like I said, 1984 Macintosh came out. So 1989, the World Wide Web. And then pretty cool, in 1990, the Hubble telescope came out. There are some things that I'm looking on this website that were not mentioned that are, really, I would think, important inventions. Let's start with the airplane. The airplane was invented, I actually doesn't say when, but I can find that out. I know that it was at some point, I think, what was it, maybe, oh God, come on, the actual, not Amelia Earhart airplane, but I think like commercial airplanes would be something to kind of... I know that the invention was probably by the Wright brothers, which was like forever ago. I can't remember what was that. I don't remember. I would have to say possibly in the early 1900s. And the question is always, I've always wanted to know, like, who actually invented it? And from what I read, it was someone by the last name of Dumont, and maybe somebody else who actually invented the airplane. But also, when was the first airplane invented and why? And again, I was talking about the Wright brothers. They are the ones who saw these like primitive type of airplanes that needed more updating. They lacked control, and they put one together, and they were able to kind of figure out how to balance an airplane in flight. That's pretty cool. But as far as commercial airplane invention, I don't know too much about that. Again, I can look that up, and I'm actually on my computer, and I see that in 1914, it says the first scheduled passenger airplane did take off. And this is according to space.com. And apparently this happened in my neck of the woods. It happened in Tampa. And that apparently paved the way for today's flights. Pretty cool. All right. Let's talk about the automobile. The automobile. Do you ever watch 16 Candles with Molly Ringwald? And the guy was like, automobile? Where's my automobile? Anyway, I love that movie. All right, automobile. So apparently this is something that was developed in Europe that I believe was invented back in the 19th century, but it didn't become a reality until the 20th century. But when it did, there used to be the horse and buggies, and just like anything new, other things started to phase out. So the horse and buggy became almost obsolete, and people started purchasing automobile. And apparently that was also when they became aware of how to pave roads, because they just had dirt roads to allow for these cars to ride on. So, and I'm assuming at some point there was asphalt that was invented, all these little things that you have to think about. Like, yeah, okay, so you have a car, but you need asphalt and wheels. So who invented the wheel and who invented this? But it made it possible for goods and services to be able to now be brought in, not only more efficiently, but quicker. Otherwise, it might have been an impossible means to get. But also, I want to delve into Henry Ford. He was the first one with the Ford assembly line production, and he was known for styles that were affordable to the everyday average person. And the great thing back then, obviously, which is just as great today, is it helped, gain more personal freedom and to get from point A to point Z without it taking a year and a day. So it was a really good invention. I love cars, and my son loves cars. He's loved cars since he was a kid. He actually works at a dealership. Okay, another thing I wanted to touch base on is rockets in the 20th century. So I know that rockets were invented and were used in China like 2,000-3,000 years ago. But it wasn't until the 20th century that it became something other than like a weapon for armies, and it became really big and really powerful. And yeah, they were used for weapons of war, but it was a means of us being able to access space. And without rockets, we wouldn't have been able to go to the moon or visit the solar system. And what about the satellite discs and satellites that we have? How do you think they get there? By rockets. I know that maybe you forget, but when you want directions on where to go, or you want to know, what tomorrow's weather is going to be like, well, how do you think you get it? You get all that through the satellite in space. Like I was saying before, even though you have new inventions, there's other things that come of that as well. So anyway, that's pretty cool. Okay, and the other one that I want to talk about is submarines. Yeah, this was invented in the, I think it was actually invented in the 1800s, but I believe that it did not come to fruition or really become capable of operation until the 20th century. I always had a fascination with submarines You know, I would probably never want to go in one because I'm scared of tight quarters, and I don't know. I get a weird feeling knowing that I'm so many feet under the water. But it's not like a submersible. It's something that is used for reasons of war, and they do still exist today. It's like a boat, not like a ship. But like I was saying, I think that it was not. I think I did research during the 1900s, the early 1900s. The submarine was used for World War One, and in many navies. My dad was actually in the Navy too. He was not in a sub, but when you think about what it is that they're used in, what part of the military? Well, it's the Navy, and it was used in World War One, like I said, and it's used for attacking, the opposing team, basically. And I had mentioned earlier about, nuclear bombs, and there are nukes that are on these submarines. Not all, but some. It's a very powerful weapon. But people like scientists also use submarines for, let's say like the Titanic. They want to explore. They want to see coral reefs. They want to see ships that have sunk. So they're there for, I guess, special functions, and were most definitely more widely used, in wartime. But they are still around, and I don't know really what it's used for today. I would think that it might have something to do with maybe like covert operations, like special operations. I also think I remember reading forever ago something about the British developing like a torpedo, or like I think they were the ones that maybe invented sonar. I don't know. I'm not too sure about that, but they do carry nuclear weapons, and they are able to stay concealed instead of being like out in the open. For all you know, when you're in the ocean one day, let's say you're on a boat and you decide you want to go for a swim, you never know. A few 100 feet under you could be a submarine. You never know. All right. I've got two more I want to talk about, and the next one is antibiotics. So important. Although I know that there are lots of people that are against antibiotics, they really do help in many situations. I'm actually allergic to penicillin, and I didn't know that until I broke out in a rash. All right, so let's take a look at antibiotics. Penicillin, it says here, I'm looking at a website, penicillin cures gonorrhea in 4 hours. Wow. 4 hours, huh? So apparently it was Alexander Fleming who discovered penicillin in the early 1900s, I think in the latter part of the 20s. Back then, if you got sick, they didn't have antibiotics then, most likely you would perish, you would die. And so once antibiotics came out, it was a wonderful invention. Apparently, many antibiotics were also fatal. I guess they had to get the kinks out, but a whole range of other antibiotics, came on the market. But again, there can be adverse reactions to it. But the mortality rate was reduced, so people had a longer lifespan. So it really was a wonderful invention. We still use antibiotics today. I can't ever see that ever ending. So there's also a lot of diseases that no longer come around because of it. But I always find it fascinating to read about certain things that nobody ever thinks about, like when were antibiotics, invented. I think that, the fact that serious diseases killed people, like the plague or typhoid, something. Remember reading about that? That killed people. I mean, that people died because of it. I mean, so anyone that thinks that antibiotics aren't good, you're wrong. They're really good. There's one particular antibiotic that might be good for a plethora of ailments. So again, this was invented in the 20th century, and all different type of bacteria that we all have, that now today there's so many antibiotics that can help each and every one of us. But again, they're used to treat bacterial infections, not viruses. Okay, you should all know that. You can't treat a virus except not with antibiotics. Only bacterial infections. So more and more are coming out on the market. And unfortunately, before antibiotics, many children with meningitis, bacterial meningitis, died. But those that lived had debilitating, future disabilities, I would say. Years and years ago, strep throat was a fatal disease, and ear infections would sometimes spread from the ear to the brain, but now they have antibiotics. And penicillin, like I was saying before, it was invented by Fleming. He actually worked in St. Mary's Hospital in London, and he was able to experiment on bacteria. I think it's something about killing mold. Well, anyway, it could be much longer than this, and I don't want to get into it and bore you. But yes, antibiotics. Got to tell you, if you're going to take antibiotics, make sure that you add probiotics to your diet, because you can get another infection. And lastly, the internet. Dun, 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 dun. So, of course, you have to have the computer first in order to have the internet, right? Okay. So, guess what? All those people that learned stenography, they don't have to use it anymore. They could use the computer for it. And even better, get information on the internet. Ha ha. Let me tell you something. I think that the internet is one of the greatest gifts that we have ever been given, but it has made us a lot impatient, I think. And back in the 60s, which late 60s is when I was born, apparently the Department of Defense in the United States, they had funded this advanced research project to allow many different computers to communicate in one network. And about 3 months before I was born, a company was able to deliver a message from one computer to another. And that message was login. That's pretty cool. And so obviously technology kept growing. And then more scientists came on board. And it was scientists that actually developed the IP addresses, the Internet Protocol. And that is, that's like a bunch of numbers, like 192 dot, 15 dot whatever. And that is used for the transmission of data between different networks. So this company was called ARPANET. They adopted the IP and the TCP back in 1983. And they were then able to kind of come up with network of networks. It's pretty cool. And that became the internet. And the online world would never be the same. But it wasn't truly until I would say the 90s that it really kind of came to fruition, where another inventor invented the World Wide Web. Which is confused, by the way, with the internet, because the web is just a means of accessing like online data, like in the form of websites, versus the internet, which is what gets you onto the World Wide Web, which just completely popularized the internet, and we are all hooked on it. And with that has come, I would say, a lot of impatience and a lot of people knowing that they have immediate access to information. And I think I mentioned this once before in one of my other podcasts, that people can kind of get a little obnoxious with technology and challenge you on things that you said. You know, like if I say, oh, you know, the weather it's going to rain all next week. And the person that I'm out with would say, oh, no, I didn't hear that. And instead of saying, oh, really, I did, and then the conversation moves on, that person will take out their iPhone and check the weather. People like that make me crazy. Not only do they have to prove me wrong, but they have information in their back pocket. And I was saying with Rhonda, who hosts Thursday Thoughts with me, that people have lost a lot of patience because you can just get information in the snap of a finger. And a lot of adults are starting to lose patience because they too can access this. But, you know, shame on you. Shame on you, adults of the late 60s and 70s of when you were born. You know better. We have had the opportunity to not only experience life without this form of technology, but life with it. So we need to remember what it was like before we had it, you know? And remember that there were times when we were bored and we actually had to be creative on what to do with ourselves, right? We had no choice. So let's all remember that we all need to be a little patient with one another in today's world, I think. I think it's really important that we all adopt a little bit of patience, even a little bit, just to help us all get through the shit. Because even if you're having an amazing day, well, tomorrow night might not be so amazing. And the person that might be standing in line next to you might be having one of those bad days. And instead of being a jerk, be nice, be kind. Because what about if you were having a bad day the next day? Wouldn't you want someone to be kind for you? I think so. Anyway, I'm looking forward to spending a very quiet and small Thanksgiving with my family. This year we are not seeing my parents, which makes me sad. But I know that there's a reason, and I have to accept it and just know that things are going to be different for many, many people this year. And we're all going to get through it. So I do wish you a very, very, very happy Thanksgiving tomorrow. And I all wish you health and happiness and safety. Enjoy the rest of your week until next week. You can catch me on any social media platform under the name Nothing But Julie. And please subscribe to my podcast and leave me an amazing review, even if you thought that this podcast was boring. I truly appreciate you.